Nestled in the rolling hills of northern Vermont was the town of Millfield, a place so picturesque it could have been plucked from a postcard. With its white picket fences, maple-lined streets, and a population just shy of 3,000, Millfield was the kind of town where neighbors waved from their porches, kids rode bikes until dusk, and the sharpest danger came in the form of gossip whispered over coffee at the local diner. But on a frosty morning in November 2017, that peace shattered. Maggie Carver, a 56-year-old elementary school teacher beloved by nearly everyone in town, was found dead in her home on Alder Street. It was Ruthie Lang, her next-door neighbor and longtime friend, who made the discovery. She'd noticed Maggie's porch light still on well after sunrise. Something Maggie, a creature of habit, never forgot to turn off. When Ruthie knocked and got no answer, she tried the door. It was unlocked. What she found inside would haunt her forever. Maggie was lying in her living room, her throat slit. The room showed signs of a violent struggle. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, a broken picture frame. But nothing was missing. No valuables taken. No signs of forced entry. Just one chilling detail. The front door had been left wide open. The town was stunned. Maggie had no known enemies. She was kind, generous, and deeply involved in the community. She baked cookies for her students, volunteered at the library, and still sent handwritten birthday cards. Her death didn't just shock Millfield, it cracked its very foundation. For weeks, the investigation yielded nothing. No suspects, no motive, no answers. The police urged residents to remain calm, but fear crept in like the winter frost. People started locking their doors, watching their neighbors, wondering if the killer was someone they knew. Then, 3 months later, it happened again. In February 2018, the body of Joel Whitaker was found in the woods behind Millfield Elementary. Joel was a 34-year-old handyman. Quiet, dependable, and well-liked. He'd gone missing 2 days earlier. His body was discovered by a group of teenagers sledding near the tree line. He'd been stabbed multiple times. His wallet and phone were still on him. There were no signs of a robbery, no signs of a struggle. Just like Maggie, Joel had been killed with chilling precision. And just like Maggie, Joel had left his door unlocked. The town spiraled into panic. 2 murders, no suspects, no clear connection except one. Joel had done odd jobs for Maggie. Just a week before her death, he'd fixed her porch light. Some said he had a soft spot for her. Others whispered it was more than that. But whatever the truth was, it died with him. The Vermont State Police brought in outside help. Profilers, forensic experts. They combed through both crime scenes, looking for anything that could tie the murders together. Then came the break. A partial fingerprint was found on the broken picture frame in Maggie's living room. It was faint, almost smudged, but it was enough. It matched someone in the system. Eli Carver, Maggie's estranged nephew. Eli had a record petty theft, drug possession, a few bar fights. He hadn't been seen in Millfield in over a decade. Most people assumed he'd left for good, but he hadn't. He'd been living in an abandoned hunting cabin just outside town, off the grid. When police searched the cabin, they found Maggie's missing jewelry tucked inside a rusted toolbox. Items her family hadn't even realized were gone. They also found Joel's fingerprints on a coffee mug, suggesting he'd been there too. Under questioning, Eli confessed. He said he'd come to Maggie for help, money, a place to stay. She refused. They argued. Things got out of hand. He claimed it wasn't supposed to happen that way. As for Joel, Eli said Joel saw him leaving Maggie's house the night she died. Joel confronted him days later, threatened to go to the police. Eli panicked. 2 lives, taken to protect a secret. The trial was swift. Eli was sentenced to life without parole. But the damage had been done. Millfield would never be the same. Maggie's classroom was turned into a memorial reading nook. Joel's tools were donated to a local trade school. And every November, the town holds a candlelight vigil, not just to remember the victims, but to remind themselves that even in the safest places, darkness can find a way in, and sometimes it walks right through the front door. Just when Millfield thought the nightmare had ended, it returned. more brutal, more chilling, and more confusing than ever. On the morning of June 3, 2018, Derek Humes, 39, was found dead in his second-floor apartment above the town's antique shop. Derek was a quiet man, almost invisible in daily life. He worked as a librarian at the Millfield Public Library and was known for two things: records and maps. He lived alone, kept to himself, never caused trouble. But that morning, a neighbor noticed Derek's mailbox overflowing and his cat meowing nonstop from the window. When police entered the apartment, they found a scene disturbingly familiar. Derek was lying face down in his living room. His throat had been slit. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the carpet. A tall bookshelf had toppled over, scattering books across the floor, signs of a struggle. But once again, nothing was missing. His wallet, laptop, and even a rare first edition town ledger sat untouched. And just like Maggie Carver and Joel Whitaker before him, there were no signs of forced entry. But this time, there was something new. Caught on the clasp of Derek's wristwatch was a single red thread. Investigators sent it to the lab. Days later, the results came back. It was an exact match to a red fiber found months earlier, embedded in the weave of Maggie Carver's living room rug. Same dye, same weave, same origin. For the first time, police had physical evidence linking two of the victims. But the breakthrough raised more questions than it answered. Derek and Maggie had never met. They had no mutual friends, no shared workplaces, no overlapping routines. Derek hadn't even lived in Millfield when Maggie was killed. He'd moved back just 2 months earlier after a brief stint in Boston. There was no reason for their paths to have crossed. Except one: Millfield. The town itself was the only common thread. As news of Derek's murder spread, Millfield descended into full-blown panic. The idea of a random killer had been terrifying, but the idea of a methodical one, someone who chose victims without pattern, without motive, was worse. Parents pulled their kids from summer camps. The 4th of July parade was canceled for the first time in 72 years. Gun sales tripled in a week. Hardware stores sold out of deadbolts and security cameras. The town that once left its doors unlocked now lived behind chains and alarms. And somewhere in Millfield, a killer waited, watching, planning, choosing. The red thread was the only clue. Investigators traced it to a specific type of wool used in vintage military uniforms, specifically a ceremonial sash worn by officers in the 1940s. Rare, obscure, but not impossible to find. Detectives began combing through local antique shops, estate sales, and online forums. They interviewed collectors, reenactors, and anyone with a known interest in military memorabilia. And that's when they found something strange. A man named Vincent Hale, a 61-year-old retired tailor, had recently donated several boxes of old clothing to the Millfield Historical Society. Among them, a moth-eaten red officer's sash from 1943. It had been stored in his attic for decades until he gave it away in early 2017. The timing? Just months before Maggie Carver's murder. But Vincent had no connection to the victims. He barely remembered donating the boxes. And the Historical Society? They'd sold most of the contents at a spring fundraiser. No records, no receipts, no way to trace who bought what. The trail went cold again. But the killer didn't, because Derek Humes wouldn't be the last. Enter Detective Elise Monroe. Brought in from Burlington after the third murder, Monroe was known for her sharp instincts and relentless attention to detail. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase headlines. But she had a reputation. When cases went cold, she made them burn again. From the moment she arrived in Millfield, Monroe sensed something was off, not just with the murders, but with the town itself. The way people spoke in half-truths. The way they avoided eye contact when she asked about the past. It wasn't fear. It was something older. Something buried. She started where most detectives would end, the crime scenes. She walked through Maggie Carver's home, Joel Whitaker's cabin, and Derek Humes' apartment. She took notes others had missed. A scuff mark on a baseboard. A faint scent of pipe tobacco. A pattern in the placement of the bodies, each one facing east. Then she moved to interviews. Dozens of them. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. Most had nothing new to offer, but a few mentioned something curious. Each victim had recently shown an interest in Millfield's history. Maggie had been researching old school records. Joel had been fixing up a historic barn. And Derek had been knee-deep in the town's archives. So Monroe went to the library. It was a quiet afternoon. Rain tapped against the windows as she wandered the back aisles, past dusty shelves and forgotten microfilm. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found it. Tucked behind a row of outdated census books was a plain manila folder. No label, no markings, just dust and silence. Inside, a collection of yellowed newspaper clippings, hand-drawn maps, and black and white photographs. The headlines were chilling. Local teacher Ellen Grange missing, foul play suspected. Librarian Mark Dillon vanishes without a trace. Third disappearance in 2 years baffles authorities. The dates? 1972 to 1975. The victims? A schoolteacher, a librarian, a handyman. All gone, all unsolved. Monroe's pulse quickened. She laid the photos side by side. Ellen Grange bore an uncanny resemblance to Maggie Carver. Mark Dillon had the same quiet demeanor as Derek. Even the handyman, a man named Thomas Kearns, looked like he could have been Joel's uncle. Coincidence? Monroe didn't believe in those. She dug deeper. The folder included a faded pamphlet, handwritten, mimeographed, and stamped with a strange symbol, a circle of alder leaves surrounding a single eye. The Alder Circle. According to the pamphlet, it was a secretive society formed in the 1950s by a group of Millfield residents who believed the town was slipping into moral decay. Their mission? To preserve order through quiet correction. Anonymous letters. Social pressure. In some cases, disappearances. The group had disbanded in the late 70s after a scandal involving a missing teenager. But Monroe now had a theory. Someone was targeting the modern-day echoes of that group. Not just random victims, but symbolic ones. Maggie, the teacher, Derek, the librarian, Joel, the handyman, all mirrors of the original Alder Circle members. But why now? And who was behind it? Monroe pinned the photos to her motel wall, drawing lines between past and present. She knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was ritual, intentional, a message. And the message wasn't finished. Because if the killer was following the original Alder Circle, there were still more roles to fill. And more people in Millfield who had no idea they were next. Detective Elise Monroe had seen darkness before, but Millfield's shadows ran deeper than most. Her investigation into the Alder Circle had peeled back the town's polished veneer, revealing a legacy of secrets, shame, and silent cruelty. Formed during the paranoia of the Cold War, the Circle had operated like a secret court, exposing cheating spouses, outing suspected communists, and punishing anyone they deemed morally unfit. Their methods were quiet but brutal: anonymous letters, public humiliation, firings, and in some cases, forced exile. They called it justice. Others called it terror. Maggie Carver's grandfather had been one of the Circle's founding members. Derek Hume's uncle had served as its unofficial archivist. Both men had taken their secrets to the grave. But someone else hadn't forgotten. Someone had been watching, waiting. And now they were striking back. Elise compiled a list of every known member of the Alder Circle and traced their living descendants. Most had moved away or passed on. Only a handful remained in Millfield. Among them, Catherine Doyle, the town's current mayor. Catherine was sharp, composed, and fiercely protective of Millfield's image. When Elise confronted her with the truth about her father's involvement in the Circle, Catherine didn't deny it. She simply said that was a different time. We did what we thought was right. But someone clearly disagreed. Security was tightened. Catherine was placed under 24-hour protection. Patrols were increased. Cameras installed. Elise even moved into the mayor's guest house to keep watch herself. But the killer was always a step ahead. On the morning of January 12, 2019, Millfield awoke to a fresh blanket of snow. The town square, usually quiet in winter, was eerily still. A maintenance worker clearing the paths was the first to see it. At the base of the war memorial stood a figure slumped against the stone. It was Mayor Catherine Doyle. Her throat had been slit. D. A red wool thread was found on her coat. Next to her, nailed into a wooden post, was a hand-carved message. Justice, long delayed, is justice denied. MLK SW. The town was paralyzed. The killer had struck at the heart of Millfield's leadership, under protection, under watch, in the most public place imaginable. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a statement. Elise stood in the snow, staring at the message. The quote wasn't random. It was deliberate. A condemnation, a warning, and a promise. The killer believed they were righting a historic wrong. That the sins of the Alder Circle had gone unpunished for too long. And now they were delivering justice, one bloodline at a time. But Elise knew something else. The killer wasn't finished. There were still names on the list. And one of them was hers. Millfield remains quiet today, but it is a different kind of quiet. Gone are the days of unlocked doors and neighborly assumptions. The murders of Maggie Carver, Joel Whitaker, Derek Humes, and Mayor Catherine Doyle left scars that no snowfall could cover. The town's charm, once its pride, now feels like a mask that was finally torn away. Detective Elise Monroe's investigation didn't just catch a killer, it unearthed a legacy. The Alder Circle, once whispered about in half-truths and buried in dusty archives, was dragged into the light. Their records were made public. Their actions, once justified as moral correction, were exposed for what they truly were: fear, control, and cruelty masquerading as virtue. The town council voted unanimously to strike the names of Alder Circle members from public buildings. Statues were taken down. Streets renamed. School curriculums rewritten to include the truth. For the first time, Millfield began to reckon with its past, not as a footnote, but as a warning. Some residents left, unable to bear the weight of what had been revealed. Others stayed, determined to rebuild something better. A memorial now stands in the town square, not for the Alder Circle, but for their victims, past and present. It bears no names, only a single inscription. Truth is not always kind, but it is always necessary. As for Elise Monroe, she left Millfield quietly just as the snow began to melt. She never gave interviews, never wrote a book, but those who knew her say she still keeps a red thread in her coat pocket, a reminder that justice, no matter how long delayed, must never be denied again. And somewhere in the hills of Vermont, the wind still whispers through the trees. But now Millfield listens.